So you just ran and got some lunch. I can only assume that it was, in fact, Popeye's chicken. Is that the go-to everyday meal?
Actually, I try to limit my Popeye's runs to Friday just for cardiovascular reasons. I had tacos today.
All right.
I'm not sure how much better that is than fried chicken, but it seems better.
Right. Is it, so I know the Popeye's chicken sandwich is like, from the heavens. Is that your go-to, or are you just across the board, biscuits, chicken, the whole thing?
It depends.
Okay.
Like my go-to is definitely the 4-piece combo, but I do frequently audible to the sandwich now because it is not a letdown. It's strictly like, what are you in the mood for today? Do you want a drumstick, or do you not want to get your hands messy today?
Truth be told, I've never had Popeye's chicken in my life. I just want to apologize for that. Now, if you want to end this conversation right now, I don't blame you.
No, that means we got work to do on you, man. We got to bring you around.
We grew up with Brown's chicken. I think it's a Chicago thing. But they had all the, we did like our catering for major events, weddings and funerals and birthdays and things through Brown's Chicken. And they had like the four or the major food groups, they had chicken, Italian beef, and mastacholi. And so yeah, that's what I grew up on. And otherwise I don't, I have such an issue eating, without utensils. I don't want it, like my hands. I don't know.
I don't know if it's a Southern thing or if it's a product of having grown up in a household that went out for a lot of fast food or something. But no such reservations here about using hands.
Clearly, chicken and tacos.
Yeah, driving down the road after a Popeyes run, steering wheel in one hand and a drumstick in the other.
I remember I had a summer job once where we were putting up like fences and stuff in people's yards, and it was an entirely I was a token white dude in this entire Hispanic crew, and for whatever reason they adopted me as one of their own, and this is just another hand with food thing, and they would bring like whole chickens to the site with That's tortillas. Awesome. And they would take a tortilla and they just grab part of the chicken with the tortilla and just shove it in their face. And
beautiful.
I was like, what?
God, that sounds incredible.
Right. It actually was. It was great. It was like this, and it was like this, I'm not a big sort of like man type of thing, but like it was like this, kind of caveman return to your roots sort of.
I'm a huge roasted chicken guy too. So you've just pinpointed a way to marry a couple of my loves of tacos and roasted chickens.
There you go. Just set it up next to your desk and you just use the tortilla as your napkin grabber, whatever.
That's brilliant.
Anyways, thanks for doing this, man. Welcome to the show. How are you? How are things?
Things are good, man. It just got cold here.
What is cold there?
Well, cold is like, I'm going to say it's probably low 40s right now, which is
pretty cold.
Which is daytime cold for us.
That's pretty cold. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost, I'm in Chicago and it's below 40, but when it hits 40, it's significant, man. It's cold.
I'm going to be in Pinehurst next week and I've been checking out the weather forecast for that.
Yeah.
And my last morning in Pinehurst is going to be a Tuesday, and it's supposed to be like 21 degrees at 8 o'clock in the morning when I tee off. And so we're going to have to see, man. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that.
What will be the spectrum of temperatures from beginning to end? I mean, you're ending at 21, but will you get at least like a 60 or something in there?
On that day or just in general?
Just in the stay in general.
Yeah, it's not going to be bad. I think most of it's going to be in like mid 50s to upper 50s kind of stuff.
Okay.
It'll probably be a little cooler than that in the, when I tee off in the mornings, but it'll warm up to extremely respectable temperatures, except for like this Tuesday situation, man. I don't know. I may get an early start coming home.
At least it's at the end of the trip.
Exactly.
So like, if you want to bail, you can bail. Are you going, is this strictly a golf trip, or is this a podcast or a story trip?
Well, I mean, they all kind of run together now.
Okay.
I use these, it used to be just go up and play golf, but, now I can write about it. I'll probably pull 4 or 5 things out of it.
Really?
That'll fill up the blog content for a couple of weeks. So
how long is the .com? How long has Lying For been a thing?
Started in early 2019.
Okay, so I was there for the sort of beginnings. I wasn't sure if I came in or okay.
Yeah, so coming up on 3 years.
Yeah. Okay. And was there a certain, for the website and the podcast, was there a certain impetus to kick things off, other than there aren't that many golf blogs and golf podcasts out there, if you want to just fill that void, right?
Yeah. Well, the blog came first, and that had a few different contributing factors. Number one, I just missed sports writing. After undergrad and before I went to law school, I worked at a little bitty daily newspaper for a couple of years writing sports. And I really enjoyed it. I really loved it seems like there's just a lot more really great long form writing in sports now than there was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I've really enjoyed reading that. But I felt like there was a dearth of that in golf, other than like the Golfer's Journal. Golfer's Journal is awesome.
Right. Yes.
But other than that, not a lot of long form writing, especially not on the internet. So I kind of eventually I got bored with it and thought, well, if nobody else is going to do this, I'll do it. And I really enjoyed that. The podcasting side of it, I started earlier this year.
Yep.
I had a few story ideas that I thought just lent themselves better to an audio presentation than long form writing. Mm-hmm. And so I guess I had enough of those ideas floating around in my head where I just finally thought, you should just break down and do a podcast once a month and do these that way. So it's a lot of work, as you know.
I was going to ask, you have chosen to do this style of podcasting is relatively simple. It's kind of live to tape. I do very little editing. I do some sound stuff, maybe cut here and there.
Selling it,
but you're doing a full. And this is why I've listened to 2/3 of your shows. I've listened to 4 out of 6. I have 2 left.
I appreciate it.
But I really wanted to get through, after listening, especially to the first 2. I think the second one was that the Casey Martin?
That might have been the third one. I know the second one was in Memphis with Rob Collins.
Oh, that's right. It was Walk Through the Park, right? And there's some overlap with me. I have a pal, Zane Ellis, who worked on that. I know
Zane.
Do you know Zane, really? Yeah.
In fact, I met Zane at Overton Park.
Yeah, that's my guy. He told me the story about the trees and the sensitivity around that. And he was approached by a local saying, what do you guys plan on doing with that tree right there? And he was kind of like, well, we got to cut it down. And it was a whole thing, It was like, it was an issue.
Yeah, but, it's in the middle of this old growth forest. That's thousands of years old. Mm-hmm. It's, I believe, it's either the oldest old growth forest inside a major city limits or the largest in the United States.
Yeah.
And so within the boundaries of the golf course, they had a bit of free reign, but on the edges of the golf course, absolutely hands off. There was one spot where I was I was walking around with Rob at one point and kind of pointed to this spot on the edge of a fairway and was there's a lot of tangled vines and stuff up there. I said, when are y'all going to clear that out and get a little more air circulation in here? And he was like, never. If we do that, they will run us out of town, dude. So we can't touch that stuff.
Yeah. That part of it is so fascinating to me because I just, I don't think about that kind of thing. It just doesn't occur to me that they would have, it's a golf course, like whatever, like it's, they're going to build it. But man, just those outside, nothing to do with golf sort of things just is pretty amazing.
Hanging out with them, and Rob has been very gracious. He's let me come check out a few of his projects that were in progress. And the revelation for me, and I'm kind of a golf course architecture dork and and have been for several years, but like to actually go out and see it happening, it's so eye-opening in that you realize, yeah, there's an artistic part to this, but fundamentally, this is a construction project.
I was going to say, yep, it's a construction project.
This is not like, this is not like painting in your studio. I mean, there are, the elements are in play, and you've got like zoning issues. You've got these land use issues that you've got to respect. There are tons of moving parts. Different parts of the course are in different stages of construction than others. And so there are just 1,000 balls in the air.
It's crazy.
Almost none of which have to do with like, is this contour going to be 8 inches or 7 inches?
Right. Right.
Now the shapers are really the artists out there.
Yeah.
I was astonished at not just how much free reign they have, but like how good they are at building these subtle little features in a bulldozer.
Yeah.
It seems incredible, but it's fundamentally a construction project. That was the big shock to me.
Yeah. When you're doing these story type of, things. It's funny that, you kind of led me into this, but, I'm sure and you're a lawyer, so you're kind of, to me anyways, it feels like, you're putting a case together almost, as you're telling this story, like you're kind of laying out this, facts and you're supplementing it with, real time sort of people telling the story and stuff like that. But, like the Casey Martin thing, I thought I knew about that until I listened to your stuff and it was just incredible. Like, do you learn stuff about these stories as you're creating them? Yeah. So there's some things that, are you changing some of that narrative based on that, or do you kind of just like let it play out and go from there?
A lot of these I go in, and this is probably evidence that I'm guilty of, picking topics that I'm somewhat familiar with already.
Sure.
But I still I start out with stuff thinking I have a basic idea. And sometimes I don't, and I learn something that's completely at odds with what I thought I was going to find out. But, in all of these, I've had to learn myself up while going, because it's, it's, you get into a subject, even like the Casey Martin case. When I was an undergrad, I wrote a paper about that case just because I was so fascinated with that case and so moved by it.
Yeah.
And then, years later doing the podcast, you learn about just little details of it that you had no idea about. So yeah, you're always learning something.
Yeah. That episode's so good. Hearing the judges speak about it. I never sought that out. Is it public? How did you get the actual Supreme Court? Like
there's
voices.
Yeah, there's a website that I got turned on to in law school called Oye. I think it's the Oye Project. That word is chosen from the Latin term that's used when courts convene. Before the judge walks in, they'll gavel and say, "Oye, oye, oye." Now comes the honorable so and so, and I believe it's Latin for basically "hear ye, hear ye."
Okay,
and so they have this huge database of basically every Supreme Court decision ever, and if there's audio available for the oral argument, it's available. And so I got the audio there. I'd never heard that argument before.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating to go back and listen to that. There are all these voices involved from people who are no longer on the court, either because they've resigned or died. And it's really interesting. It's a great little time capsule.
It's really powerful within the story itself, just to be able to go and just hear that. It's just, I don't know. It was great. And then, the other one that I just wanted to call out, because it was just completely and absolutely eye-opening, was around the women in golf, kind of thing where you, and things that I'd never had even considered. I can't remember her name, but, the architect that you had on, talking about the forward tees and how they're still not even really good, for players.
That was Jan Beljan, and she's awesome.
Yeah, she's great.
That and it's a math problem. It's not like there's any mystery around this. You just you can calculate how far does the average amateur woman hit the ball, and how long of an approach does that leave her into the green, and that your average set of red tees at your daily fee golf course is still nowhere near forward enough for the average woman player.
Yeah. And it's of course it's not an intentional action, but it's still being, exclusionary. It's still
for sure
sort of not really being that inclusive, even though you're saying you can't just throw out tees and be like, there, go there. You got to put some thought into this thing, and do it.
The hole that was really eye-opening for me, and I mentioned this in that podcast, was the fifth hole at Pinehurst number 2.
Yeah.
Which is this awesome little – it's not a short par 5, but it's reachable if you hit a really solid drive. And but, it's that classic decision to make on reachable par 5s with your second shot is, okay, I'm in the fairway. I've got a chance here, but I'm inviting a lot of risk. What do I do?
Mm-hmm.
But for the average woman player who hits the ball 150 yards off the tee, the forward tees at that hole are not 100 yards in front of my tees. Yeah. And so, she can hit a great drive and still be nowhere close to the point where she's having to make the strategic decision that Donald Ross intended her to make on that hole. So it was eye-opening for me too.
Yeah, it was really good.
Thanks, man.
You're welcome. But I'd kind of touched on this a little bit, but as a lawyer, do you kind of, I know you just wrote something about the PGA being able to actually kick someone out of their tour or whatever, and the implications there. Is that the lens you commonly, is that like a natural view of things for you, or do you have to kind of fight that, or how do you sort of approach different stories like the ones that you cover both on the site and in the podcast?
I do try to fight it.
Do you?
Because, number one, I think lawyers have a tendency to try to make everything a legal analysis, and that's not the way normal people think.
Right.
And number two, legal writing is generally not good writing. I think there's a big difference between the writing I do when I'm writing a brief and sports writing. And there probably shouldn't be a big difference, but I feel like I slip into more legal writing habits when I'm writing something like this. And so the story you're mentioning about whether the PGA Tour could, I should rephrase that. What sorts of legal implications there would be if the PGA Tour did that. It was one of the only times I think where I've really just dived in and said, okay, this is going to be a legal story. But still, I tried to be mindful of, most of the people reading this are going to be regular human beings, and they're not familiar with terms of art, nor should they be, because they're not weirdo lawyers like you and 1% of your readership. So still tried not to, overdo it.
Yeah. Yeah. The, man, that thing, it just, and I read it and I was just, it's again, fascinating stuff that,
I appreciate it.
To your credit, like it did sort of clarify, because I don't know any of that shit, man. And I don't really, the only reason I read it was because you wrote it, and because it was just something that I figured like, well, I should finally figure out what some of this stuff is, because it involves sort of the what is it, the NFL's sort of bargaining agreement and how they could kind of carve the thing out or whatever. And yeah, just super interesting stuff.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's the thing that I realized working on that story is like how the PGA Tour, they've done a really good job this year, as this thing has started coming to a head, of projecting a lot of confidence and projecting this sort of air of inevitability that, of course, this is going to work out for the PGA Tour. They've, almost no one alive remembers a time when the PGA Tour wasn't the number one golf circuit in the world.
Sure.
But their situation is pretty tenuous, man.
It's pretty interesting.
There aren't a lot of great options in front of them. You're just kind of choosing like which bad option would you like to go with, and which is the least bad option.
Yeah,
and I think that is kind of the position they're in here. Do you let these folks go, or do you put up your best defense and implicate some thorny legal questions that maybe work out in your favor and maybe not? It's tricky.
Yeah, it almost feels like you're right. They are trying to project confidence, but at the same time, it just seems like they're throwing everything out. Like they're just throwing everything, see what sticks, and kind of go from there. And it's very reactionary to all of it, because I don't think they thought it was a legit risk or a threat, and now it might be real. Like this might be a real thing that they got to deal with.
Well, every time it has looked like the thing was kind of going to go away, the Saudis put up more money or take the next step. And really the only way this works out perfectly for the tour at this point is if the Saudis just get bored with it and just walk away. And that would be a huge change in behavior. So I don't think anybody should expect that.
Yeah.
I mean, the tour really doesn't have a lot of great options here. The biggest thing the tour has is certainty. That we have been the preeminent professional golf circuit for 50 plus years since our inception in the 60s, and we have offered players a lot more money over the years. We're not going anywhere, and if you want, if you're 22 years old coming out of college and you want to have a great lucrative career in professional golf, this is a sure thing.
Yeah. They
cannot outspend the Saudis, though. If it gets into a bidding war, like it's over.
That's true. You're right. All right. Well, let's talk about you, mister, a little bit.
If we must.
You'd mentioned before that you did some sports writing previously. Was it a specific sport you were covering? Were you covering golf, or was it just, assignment based? What were you doing?
I was 22 years old, graduated from Ole Miss, and I never, for years, I never thought I would actually use my journalism degree. I always assumed I would go straight to law school, but about halfway through my senior year, I was just tired of school. And so went to the newspaper in a little town in East Mississippi called Meridian. If you've ever driven through I-20 across Mississippi, and you go through Meridian about 15 miles before you get to the Alabama line. Okay. And so I was there for 2 years. There were, I think at most, there were 3 people on the sports desk when I was there, me being one of them. So it was a very small department. Yeah. Did a lot of local sports. I did a little bit of everything. I covered the Ole Miss football season, Eli Manning's senior year.
Did you really?
It was a lot of fun.
That's cool.
But then also like going to junior high soccer games in the dead of winter. It's like 15 degrees outside, and just kind of standing on the sidelines with a notepad. It was a little bit of everything. And then we were an afternoon paper at the time, not a morning paper. So we that meant logistically we would lay out the paper like in the middle of the night. So that when everybody got to the office at 8 o'clock in the morning, the thing was ready to go, and the presses would start running, and then you're delivering the paper middle of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And so I spent a lot of nights up there laying out the paper, laying out the sports section at 2, 3 in the morning, and
jeez.
Yeah, it was a very weird 2 years, but also it was a lot of fun. I missed it. I knew when I left to go to law school I was going to miss it.
Yeah. Did you keep, or when you started missing it and wanted to write about golf? Did you go? I mean, I know you wrote for Golfer's Journal, right? You had stuff in there. Is that where you went to like pitch stories, or how did you scratch that itch?
I got lucky. I started writing on the blog and then got connected to the Golfer's Journal by an acquaintance. And, the Golfer's Journal was a huge inspiration for me. I thought, okay, I like this. I think other people like this. Why wouldn't this work for just my corner of the world?
Sure.
And I still have no illusions about it ever being financially lucrative, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. One of the nice things too, I forgot to mention about the site, is that you do open it up to others to write. Like if someone's got a story to tell, you'll let them use your site as their sort of canvas.
Well, for a long time, I resisted that. For whatever reason, I just wanted to be the only voice on there. And I guess at the beginning of this year, I thought, this is stupid.
Right.
What do you gain from that? There are a lot of great stories out there that people don't have a platform for. And why shouldn't they, why shouldn't they have, borrow a day, borrow a byline on this website that, that could only enrich the storytelling. So, so I finally opened it up, and I didn't know if anybody was going to be interested in it. But I was surprised and flattered that so many people reached out wanting to contribute something. And I mean, a lot of the stories, gosh, they're better than anything I could have written. So it's been great to, whenever somebody reaches out and like, hey, I have an idea for such and such. And 9 times out of 10, I look at it and like, damn, I should have thought of that. That's a great idea.
That's awesome. Yeah. It's just kind of fun to, just to have, I don't know, just to, other voices, and then it's the randomness of it all, just like someone that pops up that you had no idea. None of us had an idea of what they had to offer. And there they are with something really entertaining and funny or thoughtful or whatever it may be. It's been pretty fun.
It's funny that early on, I had a conversation with somebody at a publication. I won't say which.
Okay.
They were kind of saying what sorts of stories they were interested in. And this person was very explicit, saying, we do not care about stories about people's fathers. Like that is overdone. We don't want any stories about fathers. And I thought, like, shit, I think that's the most interesting story in the world. Like, I want to read all the stories about people's relationships with their fathers playing golf.
Right.
So I've been really pleased that a lot of people have shared that because I think those are really interesting stories, and I think other people like them too.
Yeah. How's this is that who taught you the game of golf? How's that for a transition into golf origins?
Now, my earliest memory of screwing around with golf clubs was my grandfather's set of clubs that my grandmother kept after he died out in this old, like she had a house in Macomb, and it was like an office. It was, I say like an office building, but it was like it was a manufactured building in her backyard that my grandfather had used for an office. And so there's this old set of golf clubs back there. And my sister and I would get these clubs out, and we would just kind of nudge golf balls around in her backyard. We would take these huge cuts. And of course, this is a lesson for later in life too, that we couldn't make contact with the huge cuts. But if, you kind of just try to, take a little off your swing, you can do better.
Yeah. How about that? Yeah.
What do you know? Still trying to teach myself that.
Right.
35 years later. But so we would screw around doing that. My stepfather played a lot of golf when I was a teenager. And one day I don't know, something clicked, and I really wanted to go hit golf balls. And so I snuck his set of clubs out of the house and went to the driving range, and I was terrible, but you hit a couple on the screws and you're just like, oh man, this is awesome. You want to chase that. And so I kept screwing around with it. And finally, I guess about the time I got out of law school, I said, all right, if you're going to do this, you ought to at least be serviceable at it. So I started taking lessons.
How old are you now at this point?
At this point, I'm like mid to late 20s.
Okay. All right.
And so bought a set of Adams irons and started taking lessons from a guy in West Point named VJ Trolio, who teaches at Old Waverly. Incidentally, his sons are Cohen and Collins Trolio. Cohen was a semifinalist in the USAM in 2019.
Oh, wow.
At age 16 or something ridiculous like that. And then Collins is Cohen's younger brother, and he just committed to Ole Miss. Cohen is at LSU now. So pretty good golf teacher.
I was going to say good coach. Right.
Well, and he's really good because he can turn someone with my limited talent into a marginally serviceable golfer. So so I still go see him every few months. And
do you really?
Yeah, he's great. It's he's a blast. So started doing that and got where I could get around fairly respectably, and so here we are now. Still trying to keep it fairly respectable.
right. Aren't we all? Will? It's interesting that between age whatever it was, 13 and 25, the game still kind of it was there. It hung around a little bit, right? It kind of maybe there wasn't the time or energy or want, but it just kind of was sitting there for you.
And I've heard so many other people say that they grew up around fathers who played golf and tried to get them interested in golf, and that it just didn't take. And then one day, it kind of emerged. And I didn't have a father figure who was impressing the game on me like that. But yeah, something was there that one day I just really wanted to go hit golf balls.
Yeah.
And I have no idea where that came from, but like I said, the first time you really catch one on the face, you just oh God, that's awesome. I want to keep doing that.
Yeah. How did it? So I introduced the game to my son recently actually it was during the pandemic. I've told this story before, but you couldn't do anything, right? We couldn't go and do anything, just like everyone else that started picking up golf. But for the first time, my kids are all old. They're college graduates. For the first time, they were like, Dad, for Father's Day, why don't we go play golf with you? Right. Nice. So we made a natural foursome. We went out and I got to witness that moment, where they do strike that thing pure and
so
it was so much fun. And at the end of it, I've said this before, but we only played 9 holes, and it wasn't it was golf, right? Pick up with, whatever, let's have a putting contest here, over there, whatever. And they walked off and Dad, whenever you want to do this, You let
That's
us know
awesome.
and we'll go. Yeah, it was just so much fun to watch. Because I was somewhat like you. Like I didn't have, I was a baseball family or part of a baseball family, and that was it. That was the sport. We didn't really get, it was too important to play other things because you might get hurt or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we didn't really get to play those things. And I had a stepfather as well. And as a youth, anything that he liked, I wouldn't. Just as a general rule, because I was a pain in the ass. But the same now, like we're best friends, and like the same thing, like the guitar's in the back. He played guitar for years, and he wanted to teach me. And for years and years, I said no and no and no. I played all sorts of other instruments, and that's why he thought it would be good. And then one day, I'm like, all right, fine. He broke me down, and now, of course, we play guitar together all the time. We play golf together all the time. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting just going back to that idea that you hit it once, well, it's a wrap. I don't know. And that's such a weird, like, I didn't have that feeling when I played baseball, like that didn't really matter.
That's a good point. Because I've had the same reaction. I wasn't very good at baseball either, but, you catch a few more probably, at least at that age, you would catch more, off the and really crush one. But
right.
Same with me. I never, for whatever reason, it just never struck me the way hitting a golf ball does.
Yeah. When did you get into the architecture stuff?
I guess, gosh, I don't remember what year it was, but I started listening to the Fried Egg, and I mean, and one thing Andy always said was, even if anybody playing a golf course can tell you whether a golf course is good or not. And they may not know why. They may not be able to put their finger on why, but anybody can tell you that. Anybody can tell you when there's just something different about a golf course. And I got really interested in the why. When you walk off, you can play a $300 golf course and walk off completely uninspired, but then you could walk off one that's $15 and you had a blast. And I wanted to know why that was. Yeah. And the thing I love about that is you can go to these sort of renowned golf courses, and maybe the sorts of courses you can't go play every day, either because they're a long way off or they're prohibitively expensive. But when you go to those places and kind of figure out, okay, what is it about this golf course that I like? What is it doing that I find enjoyable? Mm-hmm. Once you put your finger on that, you can go seek that out in your local courses, and maybe they're a lot scruffier, but once you figure out what you like and you can find that somewhere close to home, to me, that's the best.
Yeah, it's so funny that Andy, God bless Andy Johnson, man. Early days of my golf life, when I started to get interested in architecture, I think he was just starting, hit the Fried Egg stuff up, and I would pelt that guy with Twitter DM questions, not like the dumb. I mean, not dumb. Like I shouldn't say the dumb questions. They weren't dumb questions. They were very novice, sort of like, how do you know this? How do you know that? And like you had these assumptions, like you had to have this base knowledge. But that dude answered every question, every time, like just the best. Just such a supportive human for us golf architect nerd wannabe people.
He's done a great service, kind of like elevating that, and not just for its own sake, but I suspect there are a lot of people like me who just they didn't know they liked golf architecture. They didn't know that they didn't know that they found that interesting. I mean, golf architecture is a little bit like brewing beer at your house. You can get as serious as you want to about it, and so that's how much you want to bite off of it, you can. And so I've just really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I think I've compared it to me, to music. So you can, when you're listening to Pearl Jam, right? I think I've made this comparison before. I can hear Jimi Hendrix. And when you look at a golf course, you can see, the influence of others into that design, whoever it may be, and you can connect those dots through history. And I feel like it's such a cool thing about the sport, about the game, where you can kind of, provide this historic sort of influence across it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, everybody has their own preferences, right? That's, and what I think is cool, other people might not think is cool. And right. I'm going to get in trouble here, but
Sweet.
I think Donald Ross is fairly overrated.
Really?
I think his best stuff is awesome, but once you kind of go down and start looking for deeper cuts, it gets kind of vanilla pretty quickly. I remember playing I went up to Maine once to work on a story for the Golfers Journal, and on the way back, I played a little course. I don't remember what it was called, but it was a like 1920s Ross, and there were parts of it that were enjoyable. It was really wide open.
Yeah.
Some of the greens were really neat, but otherwise it was just it was a golf course.
Right.
That's fair. I think I've discovered that, and there are a lot of exceptions to this, of course, but I really prefer more maximalist kind of work. When I went to Scotland a few years ago, Cruden Bay was a real eye opener for me. I just loved how much movement was in the land. It looks maximalist. Like if you just came down out of a spaceship and you didn't know anything about the history of golf course architecture, you would look at Cruden Bay and maybe Sweetens Cove, and you would say, "Oh, these are very similar." When in fact, the way those golf courses came to look the way they look was completely different.
Right.
But that was so much fun for me. And I think you get to my version of fun most commonly through more maximalist expressions than through minimalism. Although sometimes, you just find a wild piece of land like George. Well, this is not exactly the point I'm trying to make, but I was thinking of George Wright Golf Course in Boston, which is just incredible. It's a Donald Ross from, I think the 1930s. I think they built it during the Depression, and it's unbelievable. It's so good. The land is crazy. The routing is tremendous. So the land kind of lent a lot of that wildness to it, but actually, it does have a little bit of maximalism to it, because at one point, like the story goes that early on, the city of Boston approached Ross about this golf course and like, "Hey, we want to build a golf course on this land." And Ross was like, "You could never build a golf course on this land. It's too severe. If you wanted to build a golf course here, you'd have to dynamite a lot of the rock in these hills, and that would be prohibitively expensive." And so years later, they came back to him like, "Hey, we've got the money. Now come dynamite this stuff." And so he did. He dynamited, however much he had to dynamite to build the golf course. And so even Ross, who was sort of famous for his minimalist touch, was like blowing up hills in Boston to build his golf course, which, by the way, in fairness to Ross, is an incredible golf course.
Right. Yeah. But that's the thing. Like, I love those stories, man. I love those stories. They're so great.
And that's great. That's like a $50 golf course too. It's
which is even better.
Right in the middle of the city. And it's like, George Wright is a great example of like, if you're trying to find yourself as a golf course architecture person, and you're trying to say, okay, what do I like about golf? What kind of features do I like in a golf course? Like, George Wright is tremendous because it has all these contours around the greens, not just on the greens, but in the surrounds. Yeah. And you can like you can bump shots into these things and they'll feed down to the hole. Yeah. And so like, it's a great example of a place you can go and just find a bunch of really fun stuff in the golf course and where it's just like right in front of you and you can point to it and say, okay, that was awesome. That's something that I like. And take that home and, see if you can find something that does a little bit of that.
Yeah. I feel like there's the other thing too about the architecture piece and understanding what you like about it and why is part of the evolution of as a golfer. Like when you start, I remember when I started, I just wanted to try to hit the ball in the air straight. And that was it, right? Like
still trying to do that, man.
Right. But then as you start to play more and more and you kind of get comfortable not being great at this thing or whatever, you start to look around, you're like, oh, these are all different for a reason. And there are purposeful things put on this course and designed the way it is. And it's just, it's great. It's fascinating.
Yeah. And on the subject of like, there are people of all skill levels who still enjoy the game. I started listening recently to the Gruder Girls golf podcast, which is it's a riot. It's so good. And
they kind of stole the show on the women in golf. They gave their origin story too about how they came together during that podcast episode of yours. That was great.
And one of the things they said in one of the first episodes I listened to that was so liberating to me was like when they were starting out, they sucked and they were a little bit sensitive about that, but then they quickly realized like everybody sucks at this game.
Right.
Nobody is good at this. Everybody sucks. So it's fine to suck. It's fine to not be good at it. You can still have fun. Because that's all anybody's doing.
It's true. I've kept you long enough. Did you eat? Have you eaten? I don't want to keep you from your food.
No. I ate the tacos before we jumped on.
Okay, so, good.
In fact, that's one of the reasons I was 5 minutes late because I also ordered some chips and salsa and I was like, am I just going to let this sit here or am I going to eat it first? And so I apologize for being late, but chips and salsa took precedent. They were very good chips and salsa, by the way.
See, now chips and salsa I can get on board with, with the hand rule. Like I like chips and guac. So good.
We got to get you to a Popeyes. So you don't have to come to Jackson, Mississippi to find a Popeyes. In fact, when I was in that trip to Maine, I wish I remembered the name of the town, but the northernmost Popeyes in New England was like on my way to where I was going. So I was like, well, hell, I got to go there. I think there's a location slightly farther north in like Seattle, if you're looking at latitude, sure. but this is the northernmost in the eastern United States. So I went there and man, the line was out the door.
Is that right?
So like, even in the middle of Maine with these like clammy faced white people, they were like, just could not get enough of Popeyes. So I stood in line for like 20 minutes waiting on this Popeyes.
Oh my God.
But it was so good. And so that, you can get a Popeyes anywhere, man. And you need to. So,
all right. I'll give it a go. I will report back and let you know how it went.
Start with the sandwich first. I think that's a good introduction.
Yeah. Have you done the new sauce?
I have not.
The Stallion, what's her name? Yeah.
I know who you're talking about. And I haven't, but it's not because I'm averse to it. It's just that like every time I go, I'm just like, I just want to eat my chicken, man. It's so good. Why would I put sauce on this? Sometimes I do, like if I'm getting chicken from, like there's a gas station in Jackson on State Street where I go sometimes to get chicken, and it's really, really great. But it's better with a little hot sauce on it. So I'll slap some hot sauce on that. But Popeyes doesn't need that. Popeyes seasoning is incredible. So I just have the few times that I've been to Popeyes where that's been on the menu, like I don't need that.
Yeah,
I don't. It may be great, but I just don't need it.
Right.
I'm a chicken minimalist, I guess.
Right. That's right. All right, man. You have anything coming up this year? Like you want to, another episode or besides
I'm working on one right
trip?
now. I'm working on a podcast right now about the water situation in Arizona. So
interesting.
I mean, and there are a few different topics that I think are interesting here that converge into this problem that they have in Arizona, which is, there's climate change, there is water sustainability, both within golf and in the broader world. Mm-hmm. Like Arizona is about to lose 20% of the water that it pulls from the Colorado River. Yeah. And the Colorado River is the largest renewable source of water that Arizona gets.
Yeah.
So they're about to lose that. And so there's this whole statewide plan to try to reduce the amount of water that's getting used statewide. And golf courses, some golf courses anyway, are fighting it tooth and nail. And,
sure.
And this coincides with this whole broader push in golf, which is, trying to do more with fewer inputs.
Yep.
And so I think it's fascinating. So I'm working on that and hoping it'll be out in early December.
Cool, man. Can't wait. I have family in Arizona, so I've heard some of that sort of issue from them. They've talked about before. I mean, the Colorado River, you're right. Like that's basically their water.
Yeah, they
in fact,
like, and even like farther inland, apparently for example, like the indigenous tribes from whom water rights were stolen in the 1800s by American settlers, in the past few years they won a settlement to get their water back, which is awesome.
Yeah.
But the way that the water is delivered to them now, it's not down the Gila River like it was in the 1800s. They have to truck the water in from the Colorado River. And
wow.
Even in the current context, one of the proposals for dealing with this problem is to like truck in water from the Mississippi River. And the federal government is like, no, that is not feasible. You're going to have to figure something else out. So I don't know what they're going to do. I don't think they quite know what they're going to do. And I'm sure the golf courses don't know what they're going to do, but it's a problem, man. And so just trying to, find a way to tell that story. I don't know that there's a solution that's, obvious to be proposed, but it is a really complicated, interesting problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
So we'll see.
That's fascinating. Hey, thanks, man.
Hey, man, this has been great. Thanks so much.
Appreciate this.
Thanks so much. I've really enjoyed this.
What's your Twitter handle? You want to give it?
Yeah, it's just Will Bardwell.
Okay,
at Will
easy
Bardwell.
Enough.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll put that stuff in the notes like a professional podcast host.
There you go.
For the listeners. All right, man. I'll let you go. Thanks.
I appreciate it, man.